Hello and welcome to a Keysmash Studios video. I'm super excited today to talk a little bit about game jams. I'm going to talk about why they're important, and then I'm going to go through our typical design process here at Keysmash Studios when we do a game jam. So the first thing that I want to talk about is why, when, where, and how. I'll get to why in a second. When, you just search up on the internet, is there a game jam near me, what time it is, and typically you go to a local one. I think it's valuable to go to a local one, that way you interact with other people. And how is you just do it. Even if you don't know how to make games on a game engine, you can just make a 2D board game. You can make a card game, you can make whatever you want, it's just a game, and do that for a game jam. Now I'm going to answer the question of why. And there are many different answers to this, but for me there's two big parts to why. The first is the crunch. Is the crunch good? I don't know. We'll leave that up for debate for people who are much smarter than me. But it is a reality in the game design industry. If you are at a AAA game, you will come to crunch right before that game comes out. If you are in indie game development, you will go through crunch right before that game comes out. It's a reality. It's a reality for any industry, really. Anytime you're competing against somebody, it's a match of how can you use your resources against their resources? Who can use their time more efficiently? Who can spend more time on something? So particularly in a competitive field or a creative field, it's really all about time, total time put in, and the efficiency you get with the amount of time that's put in that field. So even outside of game design, it's still a reality. But I think Game Jam is good because it helps prepare you for that crunch. But it's also a good learning lesson. There are things you only learn during the crunch period of a game. And when you're making games that take 6 months to a year to make, you only get to learn those lessons once, maybe twice a year. So doing it in a game jam, you get to learn really valuable lessons like we have this really cool mechanic that just needs a little bit more time, and if we get that done, we can get this sound bit done and we'll be good to go, but we don't have enough time, so you have to cut it. Like, that really sucks to do, but it's an important lesson that at the end of the day, you have a deadline, you have to get your game out so you can make money. The crunch is a reality. You have to know when you can cut things, when you can't cut things, when you need to push back for things, when you need to decide to let things go. And game jams are a really great way to get that really intensely in 48 hours and then be done with it. The second reason I think it's good is growth. There's personal growth that happens within a game jam. You find another gear to push within yourself to work a little bit harder. You learn some new skills. So I put skill growth there also. If you learn one new thing every game you make, by the time you make your 10th game, you'll be an incredible game designer and somebody that the industry can hire. So do game jams, get skill growth, get better with every game you make. My general rule of thumb for me personally is every time we make a game, I want to include something that I don't know now so I can get better at it for the game I'll make next. And that in turn makes every game that I make better than the previous game. And also on a moderately sappy level, relational growth. Every person I've done a game jam with, I'm close friends with. Just by nature of working really hard to produce something amazing with people, you grow closer. That's just sort of human nature, but it is a really fun and engaging aspect of game jams. Now I'm going to go over a little bit of the design philosophy that we do, and I'll preface this by saying I'm approaching this from a game designer perspective. I typically follow the game designer role or the producer role. There are certainly many perspectives, but this one in particular is going to be from the game designer perspective. After the big reveal, typically there's like a presentation where they reveal the theme of a game jam. After that big reveal, you sit down with everyone that's in your group. You sort out roles. If we're doing a 2D game, we have different people doing art than if we're doing a 3D game, things like that. So we sit down with everyone. We come up with a game idea, a core theme, and if we like that game idea and that core theme, the first thing we do is we talk about scope. Is it doable in a 48-hour period? If your goal is to make an open world MMORPG that has social elements and it's online and you can access it from anywhere in the world, you can't do that in 6 months, let alone do it in a month or 48 hours. So it's important to make sure that your game can be fit into a 48-hour window. We're not trying to reinvent the wheel and make the greatest game ever here. We're trying to cram so we can get a little bit better at making games in the future. So with that in mind, we take a look at the scope, how it fits into the game idea and the theme, and if that checks out, then we go on and progress to core mechanics. But as a list of like everyone that's involved in this plan, it's literally everyone at this stage. The game designer probably has a little more say in the plan, just by nature of being the systems designer of how those mechanics will work and things like that. Really the person in charge of the dynamics of the game. They have a little bit more say here, but it's not really profound in any way. So you have your coders, you have your game designers, you have your level designers, your sounds, your art, if you have a video editor or something like that, whatever the members of your team are, everyone's here in play at the plan state. We run it through, we talk about the scope, and then after we talk about the scope, is it doable in a 48-hour period? We start talking about the basic mechanics. I typically want almost everyone to be there for the basic mechanics too. So the game designer will sit down with the coder and say, hey, these are the basic mechanics, this is what I was thinking, are these feasible for a 48-hour period? Having just talked about scope, we'll probably say yep, and then we'll talk about sort of how we might want to code that, how it might interact with our game, things of that nature. We also get our sound designers and artists, and even like level designers to come sit in on these basic mechanics, because these basic mechanics dictate the dynamics of our game, which eventually dictate the aesthetics of our game. So having everybody in on the basic mechanics discussion is a great idea, because then you can send your coders off, they can start coding the basic mechanics, set it up in a test level, while you work with your level designers and your UI artist, your sound artist, and your 3D artist or 2D artist. At this stage, I transition to level design. Typically, a lot of the theme of a game jam goes into level design. So if the theme is Halloween, you want to incorporate that theme into your level design, and to a lesser extent into your UI during that whole time. So there's really two parts to this. So there's level design, and I attribute 2 parts to level design. There's the physical level that you play in the game, but also level design in a lot of game engines is the UI design. So at this time when we're talking about level design, we're going through our core mechanics and thinking how they'll work within the level. We're also talking about our UI. How can we get our UI to fit the theme, but also give some hint at the mechanics? Give some hint at, just a little bit, a tiny bit of detail that goes a long way in a game. With the level designers, I like to have the sound and the art people there already. And at this time, I'm making a list of everything that we'll need. Either it's on a whiteboard or on a piece of paper that you're writing down on. You have a list of everything that you need. You go to your level designer and you say, hey, your theme's Halloween. This is the game idea. What's the level? What are your thoughts and ideas on the level? And they start designing a level. Then you go to your UI person and you say, hey, here's our theme, here's our core mechanics, here's some of the UI elements we might need. How do we want to slap this together? Like, how do we want to do this in a way that really highlights the core mechanics of our game that's in an intuitive but intriguing way? And they start drawing out some UI. And then the 2 of them come together. And you have this great discussion where your main level artist says, hey, we're doing this theme inside a house. I need to design a whole house. Here's the floor plan of the house. Here's what some of the puzzles are going to be. And the UI guy goes, okay, here's some 2D art that I need. We're putting all this stuff together. This is how it's going to look. Here's a basic template. And you take all those things, you put them onto your list of things that you need, and then you send them off to start working. They can start working with basic shapes, if you're doing 3D models and you don't have the 3D models yet, have your level designers start with placeholder stuff. And same with UI. Start with placeholder things and then drop actual art into it as your art finishes. So after level design, you're left with just sounds and art. In bigger games, this is not true. There's a lot more than just like 4 main categories. But for game jams where you have typically about 5-6 people maximum, this is pretty true. Sometimes you'll have people doing multiple jobs. That's just the nature of it. The game designer sits down with the artist, whether they're doing Foley art, that's the like sound effect art, where like you knock on a piece of wood. Oh, that's someone walking into a house, or you're doing the actual like composition of background music to go into your game. You'll also by this time have a very good design or very good idea on what you want the art style to do. So currently we're making a game that's cartoony. So the art style of that game is cartoony. You tell that to your artist, your 2D artist, and you say, okay, I want everything done in this style. And you give them some reference art, and they go off on their way with your list that you've prepared from all your previous discussions, and they start doing art. If you have a 3D modeler, you say, hey, here's the general art style. This is going to be a Gothic house. Here's the floor plan. Here's some of the things that are needed for a puzzle. Go get them, Chief. And they run off and go do it. At this point, everyone's doing their thing. The only thing left to do at the end is sort of compile everything together at the same time. And this is the really frustrating part and the most amazing part of a game jam all at the same time. So typically your game designer and your level designer sit down and we're just importing everything into this one scene, or you're just sort of combining everything together and you have one person who's the compiler. I typically think whoever is the game designer does this, but that's certainly different for many different teams. You're one person who compiles everything, takes the information from the level, puts that in. They get with the level designer who's now getting 3D art. They put the 3D art into their level. If you're doing a 2D level, you get with your 2D artist and they're putting information in as you go. You have placeholder sprites. It's coming together. Your code comes in. You're testing out basic mechanics on your level, and it starts to all come together. And that's the really amazing part of a game jam. When a game starts to come together and you're playing it for the first time and you're just like, wow, this is amazing. This is so much fun. I'm so glad that I did this. I'm so glad that I put off sleep to do this in 48 hours. But then comes the frustrating part. You're talking with your artist and, I need 2 more hours to do art. You're talking with your sound designer. I need an hour more to do these sounds. You're talking with your coders. I need much more time to do this sort of third mechanic that we think would be a really cool addition. But you have 2 hours left until it's due. This is what I was talking about earlier with the crunch. This is where it comes together and you're like, we've got 2 hours left. I have to call it at this point so we can turn it in. Get me things within 30 minutes, otherwise it's cut. And that's a lesson that it's really hard to learn multiple times a year. You have a deadline at the end of a game jam. A game is due at the end of a game jam. You can't not turn something in. So you have to turn something in, even if it's not everything that you want to turn in. So cuts happen at this stage. It's incredibly frustrating, and it's disappointing on some levels, but it never, ever, ever comes close to outweighing the amount of fun that you get out of compiling everything together and starting to see the game for the first time. I always have this huge grin on my face when you put all the models in and you get every mechanic working and you do your first playthrough. It's just so much fun. Is it frustrating to cut out some things that you think would make the game a lot better? Sure. But it is a 48-hour game, and they're a lot of fun. They're really beneficial, and I really hope that you guys go out and do one. Go ahead, Google them up in your area. Let us know what you think about them. Let us know if you've competed in a game jam before. We'd love to see your video. Throw it down in the comments below. I will go through and watch all the videos that people send to us. Whether it's 1 or 10,000, I will watch all the videos of people's stuff that people make in game jams. It is incredible the amount of stuff that people can get done in 48 hours when they really put their mind to it. With that said, I hope you have liked listening to me ramble about game jams and how they're beneficial and sort of the process that we go through in our game jams. If you have any questions, please let me know. I'm always more than happy to help. Take a look for our Discord. I'll put the link in the description below. I'll also put a link to our gaming channel where we play lots of games. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, please let me know down below. Like, comment, subscribe, all that jazz. It really does help us out. And hopefully we'll see you next week.